Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Hello everyone, today I am telling about the English language, means history of the English language from old English to modern days. Old English language to modern days. So this is very important to our bachelor degree examination if you have history of English language. Okay, so without wasting the time, let's start our video directly. Okay, through the centuries the English language continues to evolve. Let's take a look at how English was changing from the old and medieval English periods to our days. Content: history of the English language. Today English is one of the most common language in the world, spoken by around 1.5 billion people globally. It is an official language of many countries including the United Kingdom, United States, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. English is also the lingua franca of international business and academia and is one of the 6 official languages of the United Nations. Despite its widespread use, English is not without its challenges because it has borrowed words from so many other languages. It can be it can be difficult to know how to spell or pronounce certain words, and because there are so many different dialects of English, it can be hard to understand someone from a different region. But overall, English is a rich and flexible language that has adapted to the needs of a rapidly changing world. It is truly a global dominant language and one that shows no signs of slowing down. Join us as we guide you through the history of the English language. And what is the English language and where did it come from? The English language is a West Germanic language that originated in England. It is the third most spoken language in the world after after Mandarin, Chinese and Spanish. English has been influenced by a number of other languages over the centuries, including Old Norse, Latin, French and Dutch. The earliest from English were spoken by the Anglo-Saxons who settled in England in the 5th century. The Anglo-Saxons were a mix of Germanic tribes from Scandinavia and Germany. They brought with them their own language, which was called Old English. The different periods of the English language. The English language has gone through distinction period. Throughout its history, defined aspects of the language have changed throughout the time, such as grammar, vocabulary, spelling, etc. The Old English period began 5th century to 11th century. Medieval English period began 11th century to 15th century, and modern English period began in 16th century till today are the 3 main divisions of the history of the English language. Let's take a closer look at each one. Old English period, 5th century to 11th century, 500 to 1100. The Old English period began in 449 AD with the arrival of 3 Germanic tribes from the continent, the Angles, Saxons and Jutes. They settled in the south and east of Britain, which was then inhabited by the Celts. The Anglo-Saxon had their own language called Old English, which was spoken from around the 5th century to the 11th century. Old English was a Germanic language, and as such, it was very different from the Celtic languages spoken by the Britain. It was also a very different language from the English we spoken today. It was a highly inflected language, meaning that words could change their form depending on how they were being used in a sentence. Old English grammar also that a complex system with 5 main cases. One, nominative. Second one is accusative. Third one is genitive. Fourth one is dative, and last one is instrumental. And also Old English language have 3 genders. In the 3 genders, first 2 gender is very important. The first one is masculine, second one is feminine. These both are very important, and third one is neuter, and 2 numbers, singular and plural. The Anglo-Saxon also had their own alphabet, which was known as the Fultog. The Fultog consisted of 24 letters, most of which were named after rune symbols. However, they also borrowed the Roman alphabet and eventually started assign that instead. The vocabulary was also quite different, with many words being borrowed from other languages such as Latin, French, and Old Norse. The first account of Anglo-Saxon English ever written is from 731 AD, a document known as the Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, which remains the single most valuable source from this period. Another one of the most famous examples of Old English literature is the Epic of poem Beowulf, which was written sometime between the 8th and 11th century. By the end of the Old English period, at the close of the 11th century, West section dominated, resulting in most of the surviving documents from this period being written in the West section dialect. The Old English period was a time of great change for Britain in 1066. The Normans invaded England and conquered the Anglo-Saxon. The Normans were originally Viking settlers from Scandinavia who had settled in France in the 10th century. They spoke a form of French, which was the language of this ruling class in England after the Norman conquest. The Old English period come to an end in 1066 with the Norman conquest. However, Old English continued to the spoken in some parts of England until the 12th centuries. After that, it was replaced by Middle English. Middle English period 11th century to 15th century, 1100 to 1500. The second stage of the English language is known as the Middle English period, which was spoken from around the 12th century to the late 15th century. As mentioned above, Middle English emerged after the Norman conquest of 1066, when the Normans conquered England. As a result of the Norman conquest, French became the language of the ruling class, while English was spoken by the lower classes. That led to a number of changes in the English language, including a reduction in the number of inflections and grammatical rules. Middle English is often divided into two periods: early Middle English 11th century to 13th centuries, and late Middle English 14th century to 15th century. Early Middle English 1100 to 1300. The early Middle English period began in 1066 with the Norman conquest and was greatly influenced by the French, as the Norman brought with them many French words that began to replace their Old English equivalent. This process is known as Normanization. One of the most noticeable changes was in the vocabulary of law and government. Many Old English words related to these conquests were equivalenced by their French equivalents. Many Old English words related to these conquests were replaced by their French equivalents. For example, the Old English word for a king was king, K-I-N-G, king. It is in the Old English literature C-Y-N-I-N-G, or sing, C-Y-N-G, which was replaced by the Norman word we use today, king. The Norman conquests also affected the grammar of Old English. The inflectional system began to break down and words started to lose their endings. And this Scandinavian influence made the English vocabulary simpler and more regular. Later Middle English 1300 to 1500. The late Middle English period began in the 14th century and lasted until the 15th century. During this time, the English language was further influenced by French. However, the 100 Years' War between 1337 to 1453, England and France meant that English was used more and more in official documents. This helped to standardize the language and make it more uniform. One of the most famous example of medieval English literature is the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, which was written in the late 14th century. Chaucer was the first major writer in English, and he helped to standardize the language even further. For this reason, Middle English is also frequently referred to as Chaucerian English. French influence can also be seen in the vocabulary, with many French loanwords being introduced into English during this time. Middle English was also influenced by the introduction of Christianity, with many religious terms being borrowed from Latin. And next stage, modern English period. It is began in 15th century and it is now onwards. The third stage of the English language is known as modern English, which began in the 16th century and continues to the present day. The early modern English period, or early New English, emerged after the introduction of the printing press in England in 1476, which meant that books could be mass produced and more people learned to read and write. As a result, the standardization of English continued. The Renaissance, 14th century to 17th century, saw a rediscovery of classical learning, which had a significant impact on English literature. During this time, the English language also borrowed many Greek and Latin words. The first English discovery, a table alphabetical of hard words, was published in 1604. The King James Bible, which as first published in 1611, also had a significant impact on the development of early modern English. The Bible was translated into English from Latin and Greek, introducing many new words into the language. The rise of the British Empire 16th to 20th century also had a significant impact on the English language. English became the language of commerce, science, and politics, and was spread around the world by British colonies. This led to the development of many different varieties of English known as dialects. One of the most famous example of early modern English literature is William Shakespeare's play Romeo and Juliet, which was first performed in 1597. To this play, William Shakespeare is considered the greatest writer in the English language. The final stage of the English language is known as modern English, which has been spoken from around the 19th century to the present day. Modern English has its roots in early modern English, but it has undergone several changes since then. The most significant change occurred in the 20th century with the introduction of mass media and technology. For example, new words have been created to keep up with changing technology. Old words have fallen out of use. However, the core grammar and vocabulary of the language have remained relatively stable. Today, English is spoken by an estimated 1.5 billion people around the world, making it one of the most widely spoken languages in the world. It is the official language of many countries, including the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia. English is also the language of international communication, and it used in business, education, and tourism. English is a fascinating language that has evolved over the centuries, and today it is one of the most commonly spoken language in the world. The English language has its roots in Anglo-Saxon, a West Germanic language spoken by the Anglo-Saxons who settled in Britain in the 5th century. The earliest from the English was known as Old English, which was spoken until around the 11th century. Middle English emerged after the Norman conquests of 1066, and it was spoken until the late 15th century. Modern English began to develop in the 16th century, and it has continued to evolve since then. Here we came end of this point. This video will be end here. We will meet another literature video in the upcoming days. So bye for now.